I think the first thing before we talk about reboots and whatnot is reboot and remake. I think that these are reboots to me. Force Awakens is a reboot. Yeah. It's a reboot of the Star Wars franchise. Creed is a reboot of the franchise. Cobra Kai is a reboot of the franchise.
Okay. Yeah, a remake is like the thing.
See,
which you haven't seen.
You're correct.
That is...
Well, yeah, exactly. The 1950s and 1980s, those are remakes. The Karate Kid with Jaden Smith is a remake of the Karate Kid, but just with, Footloose is a remake. Reboots are just rebooting the franchise in a different way. Now, here's the reason why I think that people are so... And understandably, I know why I love Back to the Future. I'm more of a Back to the Future 1 guy. I think 2, I love the second half of 2 more than I like the first half. But I think all 3 are really good movies, and I love them.
I love 3. I know 3 isn't the most.
Like 3.
I like 3 better than 2.
Yeah, me too. I do too. I like the Old West.
I mean, some people do feel that way for sure, but I think that anyway, they're beloved movies in the franchise. In no way, shape, or form do I want to see a movie with another story of Marty McFly, George McFly. If Doc Brown makes a cameo or has something to do with it, sure. But I think that what they could do with the Back to the Future lore and canon in 2018 could be something really great, as opposed to what happened in the 80s. And now into 2018, if you had, like, say, someone like Tom Holland or whoever it might be, discovers the DeLorean and takes another adventure altogether. Now, what's going to really make this work? Could it be a disaster? Absolutely, it could be. But if Zemeckis is on board, if Steven Spielberg is again as a producer, and they have writers that have but just have done things in the past to where have kicked your ass, and they get the right people and they treat it with love and care and reboot it into a new way to bring in a new series of films, then why not? Riley, what do you got?
So you're saying, because the definition is what I think a lot of people are going into on this, because remake, so I have that article up. The remake is telling the same story, right?
Yes.
But different, with different actors, maybe making some little changes.
Right.
Reboot to me... I don't see like Force Awakens as a reboot. Now I know people will go, "Oh, it's just a reboot of New Hope." No, that I don't agree with.
It's a reboot of the franchise.
Okay, for me, it's always sequel. That's a sequel. It's picking up the story later.
I think
these
they should
characters.
but they use the term reboot though because they're
trying to.
The movies haven't happened in a while.
Exactly.
In a while,
bringing
right?
Them back.
So they want to reboot it to get the franchise back and running.
The motorcycle wasn't running. You had to boot it.
Yes,
to get it going.
That's what it is because.
Now it makes sense.
Because Force Awakens sure is a sequel inside of the franchise, but it's not a direct sequel to Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi is a direct sequel to Empire Strikes Back. Right. Now, Force Awakens, again, it rebooted the franchise, got it back in the same way Cobra Kai. It's, or even what I said was Halloween, right? We talked about it before. Halloween is a direct sequel to 1978, but it rebooted the franchise because it basically retconned all the other movies, but it's rebooting this new canon where there's the third one. Those are the 3 series of films. So it's just rebooting and putting new energy into the franchise. You can tell it's in a different story. It's not so sacred that you can't touch the lore. I think you can expand on the lore. I actually think it does a disservice to the lore to not try to continue it. And people say, why not just do another time travel movie? Sure, do those too. But you can do something. Imagine someone finding the DeLorean and going.
Dude, I was thinking the same thing.
Okay, but why though? Because here's my thing. Out of every reboot that's happened, how many of those do you think, holy crap, I'm so glad this happened?
Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle.
Cobra Kai.
Isn't that kind of
a reboot?
Is that a reboot or a remake?
No, it's a reboot. It's a reboot.
Totally. So that's, okay, fine. So that's one, right?
Yeah.
So, but honestly, and I'm going to piss off some people, but I don't need any of these new Star Wars movies. As much as I enjoyed them, I would have been totally fine if they just had the original trilogy. Right. I don't think a reboot's necessary. I'd much rather than come up with a time travel movie that has nothing to do with this.
Yeah. And they will, but I just think that you can do it if you're going to do all these different, like Indiana Jones is getting a reboot.
And look at how crappy that turned out.
Well,
with the crystal skull.
That was the fourth one. They're talking about the new.
Yeah, but my point is, like, they're never good enough. Yeah. They're always fine, but they rarely capture the magic of the original that we saw when we were kids.
And the thing is, maybe to my point is, okay, so Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle. Jumanji is not that beloved of a franchise as a Back to the Future or an Indiana Jones, right? It was a great reboot of the franchise. It was hysterical. It was a fun movie.
But Cobra Kai.
Cobra Kai was awesome.
Yeah.
Really, really well done. If we're talking reboots, that may be one, but that was also a TV show and it was on
Yes,
YouTube. And
exactly.
It's a lot easier to maybe spread that out over a TV show than it is a movie.
Well, what you're saying is absolutely right. But you're kind of making the same point in the beginning, though. It's the love, it's the care, because those guys, those creators of that show, of Cobra Kai, put the love, the care. They had more time. I mean, there's how many episodes? 10?
Like 10.
There's 10 episodes with half-an-hour episodes. You know, it's like if they do 3 movies inside of this thing and Back to the Future, you gotta have the right creators, because it can be awful and it cannot work. But I just think that there's this taboo thing. Don't touch Back to the Future at all. As far as a remake, I agree with everybody.
Yeah.
But because I love Karate Kid, but Back to the Future is a better movie. Like that's the thing. And Cobra Kai, they did a really good job, because not only
it's beloved.
Yeah, yes, but there's a difference between beloved and good. Like you could remake like something like Labyrinth is beloved, but it's not a great movie. I'm sorry.
But Karate Kid was a great movie.
The amount of David Bowie.
And it's okay. It's like half. Like it's some of it's really good.
I love the first one.
But Back to the Future is like a classic cinematic.
Well,
like,
I do want to get a take here, because Copster is arguably the biggest Back to the Future fan that we have in the office.
He has a neck tattoo.
I would get a Back to the Future tattoo.
You
100%.
I'm sure you would.
Yeah.
Now you've heard it, because when I was talking to Copster about it too, you know, and your first, and I don't know if you've changed at all, but your first reaction was no, don't touch it. But then we were talking, it was like, well, it depends if they brought Zemeckis back. Like, what's your overall thoughts on if they could just continue the canon of Back to the Future, not just have Marty in there?
Yeah, I still like wouldn't want it. Bringing back Zemeckis is like the worst case scenario. Like if they were going to do it and it got announced, I would really only be excited if Zemeckis and company were coming back for it. Like I remember back in the day, back in the Phase 3 days, I tried pitching Back to the Future for Phase 4. Thank you, Cody. Yeah. Phase 5. Thank you, Cody. I tried pitching a Back to the Future just as like, you know, like, oh, this could be kind of fun. But like the more and more I think about it, it's just I don't need it. I have those 3 movies, and you know, like if they announce tomorrow that Back to the Future is going to get rebooted and there's going to be a sequel and they're doing all these things, yeah, I probably will see it. But you know, it doesn't have that much of a connection for me, because I only need those original 3.
Which is crazy to me, because like then the perfect example is they rebooted Jurassic World. They put Jurassic World there. You loved the first Jurassic World, right?
I do, somewhat different, only because that franchise is like up and down. Whereas, because I think Back to the Future, for me, I think all 3 of those movies is like a perfect trilogy.
Right.
I'm one of the only. I love all 3 of them. Obviously, I like the first one. I like the second one just as much as the first one, though, because I grew up with that one a lot. But the Jurassic Park, it's like we got the first one, which is one of the greatest movies of all time. The second one, even though I love it, it's got problems. The third one's poo. So it's like it's been enough time. It's like, all right, fine, let's see more dinosaurs. Back to the Future is just a very specific entity that is completely different, other than more past Star Wars, more past Jurassic Park. It's just, I don't know. There's something about that, especially for the time that those movies came out, that were so specific.
Can I also add something? Like, if you are going to, let's say they do reboot it, and they have the best team ever behind it, and it has nothing to do with the McFlys, right? It's a completely different story, and it's all about the DeLorean.
Yeah.
The problem is with most studios is that all they do is nostalgia. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the problem is that they're going to be like, oh, well, let's make sure we hint back to that scene in that movie. And that's what bothers me. I don't need to see the same crap I've seen already.
You're not wrong. There's certainly...
And they do that every time.
The risk and the concern, it's valid.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Can we shut the
Yeah,
mics
can you
off,
guys? Wait, can you shut the door to the studio?
It is shut. Yeah, they're just
they're
they're
just
doing
yelling.
it in the
Shut
Heroes
up. Okay.
episode. Yeah. I'll tell them to shut up right now.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Perfect.
But yeah, the concern, it's valid, and that's why I just keep harping on the fact that it just depends on who's in charge of it. Because you look at because I bring up, it's perfect because the movie comes out, Creed, right?
Yeah.
People don't remember, because the first one was successful and critically and financially. Everyone, unless you were a hardcore Rocky fan, was saying, they're doing another Rocky? Why? No, leave it alone. Rocky Balboa was it. It was done. Even Rocky Balboa, they were done with it as well too. And it's like why are we doing this? And then look, now everybody wants Creed 3. You know, so it's like there's a risk, but because of Ryan Coogler and because Stallone didn't want to do it when Coogler pitched it. Stallone was no, that it's done. It's over. I did the 6 movies. I ended it. I was able to capitalize and get away from the stink of Rocky V, and Rocky Balboa closed it out. I'm good. I don't want to revisit it because of basically what you're saying. We go back to it again. It's like, oh, why are you doing this again? We're just covering the same old things. But they found a fresh way to do it.
So you don't think either Creed, because you guys have seen the sequel, right?
Yes.
Because I haven't.
Yeah.
Okay, so either the first Creed or the second one, you don't think it had any of that nostalgia to it? Like
100%.
it was okay.
It absolutely
so it
did.
did.
But
Okay.
also-
But it didn't bother you.
No, it didn't for me. But I think that if you just rely on that,
That's
then,
the problem.
Then you can
Yeah.
get risky. But I think that they did it in a pretty good way in Creed 2. That there are things that I think you want some nostalgia in
course.
it.
But you don't want it to
rely
be
on
all of it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I
I
think that they did. Yeah, go ahead, Cops.
I think Creed is the outlier because like 2015 was like the year of the reboots. We had Jurassic World, we had Force Awakens, we had Creed.
Yep.
Creed was the one that didn't necessarily hold on the nostalgia as much. It told its own story. Whereas
Agreed.
Jurassic World
Yeah.
and Force Awakens, as much as I like those movies, they really are trying to. It's a real reboot, whereas Creed is a reboot, but it feels more like a traditional sequel, but also telling its own story.
Sure, I agree
and
with
I
that.
think I think that's because of Ryan Coogler. It felt more of a personal story than it did like an epic franchise.
Yes, and I think that that's where I'm coming from creatively. Is that's where I think that because there's so much cool stuff of what you could do in the lore, that if you found someone like what Ryan Coogler did with Creed, is that if you applied the same kind of logic to the Back to the Future lore, we could get some great, fun fantasy sci-fi stuff. What do you think?
Well, let me ask you this, because
Or sci-fi, more so.
there's reboot, sure, it's kind of continuation of the story. We're getting a little clearer now on the definition.
Right.
Remake, no. I'm kind of with you, Doreen. I don't think we need Back to the Future anything. Sequel, reboot, what have you. But there are things like Stranger Things that come to my mind, where it's nostalgic, but it's telling its own story, and it has inspirational things that are callbacks to the 80s, right? So what about a new story, time travel that's like, when you walk into the studio and you're pitching, you're going, think Back to the Future meets whatever. So you get these little, like, it's a totally original story, totally different things, but it's inspired by, and it has maybe an Easter egg
Yeah.
of a Back to the Future thing, but it's an original story. Because Stranger Things is my example for
Yeah, but
that kind of
you
telling.
got to think of it business-wise too, and I know that this
Of
is.
course.
I would rather go creative on it, but you got to go business also, and you got to think of the IP. And
Yeah, studios are more interested in selling a franchise that's already there. Is the problem.
of course.
And if you're
That's
and,
the
you,
problem.
and Universal,
But
by the way, who this is, I believe it's
Yeah, it
Universal
is.
Paramount. It's Universal.
It's Universal and Amblin.
They need. I mean, they got Jurassic World, but they need something, And if Back to the Future is it, imagine again. Younger kid, keep putting Tom Holland in there and discovers the DeLorean.
Well, so at the end of 3, they destroy the DeLorean.
They destroy it, but the question is, there's a couple ways you could do it.
No, yeah, I mean, here's what my mind keeps going back to, like, Welcome to the Jungle, right?
Yeah.
Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle. Is like, okay, if we're gonna reboot this, maybe the only character you bring back is Doc Brown, or maybe Doc Brown is dead, and
his kid made another DeLorean or some crap. Yeah.
or Marty McFly is now like a scientist of some sort or something. He's lost his whole family. He's like the now shut-in scientist that has been like building a DeLorean. Like the more you kind of think of it, there are some really fun story adaptations of things. And what does he go back in time to do? Where does he go back?
Why does he go back?
Why does he go back?
I think that there's. I mean, and that's why I want to see what kind of writers will do it. What would Chris McQuarrie do with Back to the Future?
Wow.
Where would
Phil Lord and Chris Miller.
That could be fun
think
too.
that's a
would be
good one.
perfect.
Absolutely. Like what could happen inside of this? And I'm with Dorina though. I don't want to just lie on. Oh, there's a George McFly joke. There's a that's
Hey,
a
McFly!
yeah.
Yep.
There's a that's a heavy joke. I don't need that stuff.
But they're gonna do it because that's what the studios do. That's the problem.
See, I would be more against that because I think that I'm more saying let's continue the lore of this and find new stories and new characters. Again, look, Force Awakens, right? Force Awakens played in a sandbox of. I know that people again. You can say they repeated a lot of the beats in Episode 4, but what they did inside of that,
Third Death Star.
yes, and which I hate, which is something I wish that they wouldn't have done.
yeah, me too.
But I wish they wouldn't have done that, right? But what they did do is they introduced Rey, they introduced Finn, they introduced these new characters.
And the new stuff was the good part of the movie.
That's what I'm saying. And you introduce those new things inside of this lore. And now give me this story with this kid or this new person, or maybe it's a girl this time around, or whatever it might be. Let us get to a new adventure because there's so much you can do. This is 2018 as opposed to 85.
So I agree. Okay, yes,
Yeah.
I agree. If that happens, I'm not an optimistic person.
Yeah.
So
I
there
know.
you go.
You're not wrong to feel that way.
But like, you know, Makuga brought up Jumanji.
Who's more judgmental, my judgmentalness or your optimism?
Oh.
I mean, I'm optimistic that if I got a neck tattoo, you'd still be friends with me.
I'd still be friends with
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
Well, because he knows you already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
But you brought up Jumanji, right?
Sure.
And that's a super different take on the original.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Like completely different. So another thing is I consider Back to the Future to be like the perfect family film. Granted, it's got a little stuff that's like adult, but whatever. The
Little
80s,
Oedipus
80s
Rex.
were better. But it's still a family film. And I feel like nowadays, for some reason, family films are catered to super young kids, right? Like, I don't know what it is, but unless it's like PG-13 or rated R, like we don't have the same magic that we
Yeah.
had in those types of movies.
Right.
Like I don't like it's either
Lion
it's
King?
like very Disney. It's either super for kids,
Yeah.
like look at all the superhero movies we have nowadays, especially in the MCU. When is there ever any like sexual tension between people? It's always like, oh, we're a couple and we love each other. There's no sex. There's
In
nothing
what? In
that we
family
grew up
films?
with. What?
In family films or in
Yeah.
general? Oh, okay.
Yeah, like what's it called? And it's rated
Oh,
R,
right.
and you have the kids actually acting like kids and cussing. Like you don't see that in most kids' movies,
Right.
and you saw
You're
it
like
back
Stand
in the
By
day.
Me
Exactly.
and yeah, right.
Goonies.
Even
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Sandlot, there are some adult themes in
Yeah,
Sandlot.
and so
Well,
I miss
but-
that, and I feel like they're making everything so safe now that anything that's a family franchise property is just not going to have the same magic that we had when we were kids.
Again, I
agree.
understand all the concerns. I just don't think that the concerns should make us say no. I think it should be like, well, who's going to do it? And I think we as fans should be able to pose the questions. Who? If they
Right.
say Michael Bay's doing it, get out of here.
Right.
Don't touch it. I don't want a reboot. I don't want anything. You know, it's like U-Bowl's doing it. Get lost. You know?
Complete remake with the original cast playing the same characters. No, that's the only thing I want to see.
Would you do that?
Or
Yeah.
a Marty McFly backstory. Just
That's
him
it.
being in high school.
Or a Back to the Future
You know,
television
no time
series.
machine, just a regular movie about a high school kid who
No, look,
It's
likes
just called
to play
Think-
guitar real loud.
It's just called Think McFly.
Yeah.
It's an
That's it.
8-episode Netflix
Yeah.
series.
It's called Think.
Think.
Yeah, if they did a television series, I think that's a little bit better.
They did the animated
yeah,
series.
if it was like a Cobra Kai
Oh,
thing,
wow.
they
You
don't
did.
remember the
There was a
animated
cartoon?
series?
no, I don't. I didn't know there was an
yeah.
animated series. Oh my god!
You never watched the animated series,
Dude,
Cops?
Coaster.
Cops, you got to go. I'm
God.
sure.
Oh.
YouTube it. See if
Oh
Back
my
to the
God.
Future.
Yeah, you should play
Yeah,
the
yeah.
do
Bring
the
that up.
TV theme song.
Yeah,
or
let
whatever,
me see. Let me see. Back to the Future animated series. I used to watch that series.
I
Yeah.
loved it.
Yeah. Back. I
don't think I ever got into it.
It was a Saturday morning classic.
Yeah, I'm shocked that Copster didn't know about this. See, there you go. It's Back to the Future '91, season 1, episode 1.
Show the
Is that-
theme song. Oh,
Yeah.
here we go.
There it is.
Huey Lewis.
So good.
Yeah. Do you remember this show, Dorena?
See, they would make of course.
Yeah.
You know what they would do if they made a reboot? They would
Yeah.
make this like a crappy like Selena Gomez or like hip hop version of this song,
Yeah.
and then I would kill
How
myself.
much do you want to bet
Did
Copster's
I
gonna be
miss
watching this
this?
all weekend? You gonna be watching this all weekend?
The fuck?
That's
You
why.
just
I don't
love
remember
Coaster's
this at all.
You don't either?
Not
Wow.
at all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
man.
and the Beetlejuice cartoon. I used
Yeah.
to love
Remember
that.
the Beetlejuice.